Hello, good day, and welcome to the season finale of the Point 99 podcast's 5th season. I am, as always, your host, Mr. Steve, and what a journey the past 11 weeks have been. To introduce the podcast to anyone joining us for the final episode who doesn't already know what we're all about, the purpose of the 99 is to try and help you along whatever path your journey is taking. That might be through relatable guests that we feature weekly with their unique and inspiring stories, shared experiences, and occasional lessons that we might eventually learn during our own journeys. Hopefully, by sharing these stories with you, it might help others avoid making the same mistakes. The 99's biggest goal is and has always been to demonstrate that we are more alike than we sometimes think, and that through shared conversation, we can all improve as runners and hopefully as more rounded individuals in our everyday lives. Before we introduce this week's guest, someone who I know will go down so well with you all, especially with how well last week's guest, Jimmy Bunter, James Gow, was received. Let's look at the wider community, my own running, and generally how the feedback to this season has gone. Feedback-wise during the season, it's been phenomenal, and not just directly to our guests for a change, I've been getting plenty myself as well. I was actually meant to mention a really appreciated DM I got from Martin James last week and how appreciated it was. Now, it's not just Martin, there are other people as well, but specifically Martin touched on how relaxed and calm everything was sounding right now, which was helping the overall delivery. I've purposefully focused on trying to relax a little bit more, stress less, let the chat flow, and rely less on sticking to notes and making things overly rigid over the course of the season. I do personally listen back to each episode multiple times in the editing process and once it goes live, just to make sure it all sounds as it's meant to sound. And yeah, you're right, it definitely sounds a lot more relaxed, and I get that helps a lot more with people listening. They don't want to listen to a script, they want to listen to just genuine conversation. It was certainly the case with last week's guest, James Gow, as I mentioned already, better known as Jimmy Bunter. It was encouraging to hear that even one of the big dogs of Scottish running podcasting was saying that it was the best episode that I have done yet. You would think that that was maybe a backhanded compliment, but I took it as it was meant. It's a really good compliment, and I am very appreciative of hearing that as well. It was certainly a relaxed chat with a very humble and all-round great guy. It made for a really enjoyable process from interviewing to editing and to listening to the final product. So once again, thank you to James, thank you to Jimmy for coming on and speaking to me. I know he was nervous. I know a lot of guests are very nervous coming on, but he did a fantastic job, and it was 100% well received from everyone who's listened to it so far. My hope is that this week's episode will be no different as we welcome another ultra runner to the show, one who I had the pleasure of chatting a couple of weeks ago to, actually the next day after Jimmy, I think it was, although I can't actually remember what we discussed at the time. I'm going to have to try and remember it while I record and then do the editing, but I do remember it was great. It was a very long recording, but it was a cracker of a chat that I had with her. This lady is, however, not so relaxed when it comes to her running achievements. Although she's really early to her ultra career, she's already stood high on the podium of all the 3 ultras that she's done. I'll bring that chat to you very soon, all 1+ hours of it. But first, I'll share some exciting news from our friends over at the Press Play and Run podcast, Run Club, before we pan over my week in running and take a final look at the community, what they've been getting up to, the wins, etc., the usual. In addition to thanking Martin James, though, I do want to add a few extras here before we get looking at some of the announcements, bits and pieces of my own running. First, it's a thank you to every single guest who has joined me, not just this season, but overall throughout every season so far. The podcast wouldn't be a patch on what it has become without everyone being so great, giving up their time, coming on, speaking to me, very nervously so sometimes, but it's been fantastic to share such amazing stories and individuals. It's also a thank you to everyone who's tuned in weekly or when they can. I know I say that every week, but yeah, I'm not going to loiter on that one too much because I'll probably say it at the end of this episode as well. Much like with Martin, though, I also have a thank you for Ian Glendinning, E10 for a really nice voice message, literally the morning of recording that I received from him. I really appreciate what Ian had to say to me, even if I've not had a chance to reply so far. Hopefully by the time this airs, I will have done. But if not, honestly, thank you so much, Ian. It was very much appreciated. Much love, big love, all that sort of nice stuff. Yeah, long may it continue. I'm not going to share what the message was, but long may it continue. Finally, it's a thank you to my lovely wife for putting up with me shutting every door in the house, sometimes a couple of times a week, to get enough quiet to get each recording done. She gives up so much time, not only for me, but also doing the things that she wants to do around the house because of my hobbies, namely the podcast. And of course, a juicy slice of running on the side as well. I could keep those going all day, but let's look at my weekend running and then we'll look at the responses to this week's question from the stories. Running wise for me, it is a similar story to last week and the week before, albeit last week I did have the social run in Glasgow, and then I kind of followed that up with, I think, a second run sometime in the week. It's all blending into one massive blur just now with work, the election. By the time this airs or you're catching it, it will all be done and dusted. I can take a big sigh of relief and maybe get to some normality again. But yeah, it's not been much different this week. Time of recording, it's Wednesday. I managed to get out for a 6:30 a.m. run just to bag some miles. Hopefully I'll get out on the day of airing on Friday and then maybe a bit of a longer run on Sunday just to try and get the legs turning over. I'm meant to be in ultra marathon training. I'm meant to be in marathon training. It's not gone to plan at the moment, but I know I'm physically fit enough. It's just getting time on feet and just making sure that I have everything in place for any goal that I might want to do. But we'll see. We'll get there. But yeah, hopefully praying it all goes well and that I can get back to normality. Within the community, there were two significant milestone events that I saw. One from Emma.Runs.Ultras. He had a half marathon at the Seaway Run half marathon in Muskegon, I want to say. Not a clue how that's pronounced, but well done, Ant, for smashing that. But also to Alison Jardin for smashing another marathon. She was at the Solway Coast Marathon with a phenomenal finishing time of 3 hours, 25 minutes and 25 seconds, which bagged her fourth female, 18th overall and second in her age category. She is a phenomenal runner anyway, but it's so nice to see her out smashing it, smiling. Had some really nice support there from Ryan, from Alex, from her husband, etc. And yeah, she was just smiling away in the photos. It's so nice to see. So well done, Alison. It was a phenomenal time. I just wish I could get anywhere near that. So big up. Maybe look at getting myself some Alpha 3s like you were wearing there. The question that I put out on the stories this week a couple of times, it's a bit of a mixed bag for appreciations, medals, events, roll calls, shout outs, and for your favourite bits from this season. It is a real mixed bag. So apologies if this gets a bit sporadic as we jump about a little bit. I'm going to kick things off with the lovely Steph Runs Miles. Steph responded to her favourite episode of the season, saying that her favourite is definitely Lee Campbell's episode. She did laugh a lot during Elodie's and AB's episodes, but it has to be Uncle Lee for Steph. So personally, I can't say anything. They are all my favourites, but I definitely loved speaking to my good friend Lee. It was so good having him on and giving him his very own episode. Uncle Lee himself did get into the question box and he said he loved everybody in season 5, but hands down, Jimmy was his favourite. so far. Obviously, we can't really say 100% that's someone's favourite of season 5 because, this one hasn't come out yet. It's a shout out for our man in Saudi, Doug. Doug said he's started running again after 6 months of injury. It's definitely worth shouting yourself out for there, my man. Let's hope and pray that you stay on the straight and narrow now, away from injuries, and you can start smashing some amazing runs in the heat. Goldie is shouting out an event, being the Great North Run's 43rd birthday shakeout that took place last week. To be completely honest, I hadn't actually realised that the Great North Run was actually that old, but props for popping along and getting that done. Steph McCann, the lovely curly Steph X, is shouting out the Press Play and Run Summer Park Run Tour to Mount Stewart, organised by the man from the Midnight Sun Marathon, Jim Boyle. She said it was a fab day out, and it certainly looked that way from the videos and photos that I saw on a few different people's posts over the course of the weekend. On the topic of the Press Play and Run Club though, before I forget at least, the Sunday Long Run Club is back, or almost. If you're in the Glasgow or Greater Glasgow area and you fancy running with a lot, and I mean a lot of great people, hop over to their Facebook or Strava groups to find out a little bit more on how you can attend. Also, if you don't already, follow the Press Play and Run podcast. They do have a bit of information going up in stories, also going up on Strava, also going up on Facebook of the different routes, the different groups, the distances, etc. And how you can get involved. So I would encourage you, if you are in the area and you want to run with some people, get yourself down and get running there. Steph was also saying that she loved Stuart Rowan's episode. Stuart runs a lot, that he does, as a highlight episode for her this season. Stuart himself was shouting out a nice social run on Tuesday with, and finally getting to run with myself, albeit, Stuart, that was last Tuesday. I know that my time's been blending together as well, but it was really good once again to be running with you all. He wanted to also thank everyone who listened to his episode and the lovely reactions that he received. The Edinburgh Stunner's wife, the Edinburgh Runner, aka Jace Wood, ex-guest and all-round top bloke, is shouting out Mike Houston, his fellow person, co-host, whatever you want to call it, from the Insta Runners Roundup podcast, for going to the gym. Mike's got to win the guns show at the Loch Ness 24 somehow, Jay, so cut him some slack. Finally, last week's guest, Jimmy Bunter, James Gow, wants to shout out Big Bob Burrell, another of the Insta Runner Roundup podcast chaps, as well as James, for the amount of free time that he gives up to do running groups, unpaid and for the benefit of others. That's exactly right, Jimmy. Without legends like Bob going above and beyond for the community, there wouldn't be half, if not more, of the groups on the go that you often see from town to town and villages across the country. So bravo to Bob 100% for giving up so much time out of his day to get those groups done. I would like to add my own shout out here for the Joker of the pack, Jace Wood, the Edinburgh Runner. He's not had an easy go of it lately, trying and succeeding to break himself. The man's kept at it though where he can and remains a positive pillar of the community, whether that's through DMs, deep chats, banter, as above, or with the Insta Runners Roundup podcast. So shout out to yourself, Jace. Keep at it. You're doing a great job. Right, on to what I suspect many people have tuned in for today, and that's this week's guest. I've had a lot of positive messages funneled my way for this one. A lot of people looking forward to it. So let's not hang around as we welcome a rock star of the ultra running world who might be early in her ultra career, but is already storming it. Well, let's welcome her to the show. Before I do it though, it's a little warning, a longer chat than usual, as we had such a good chat, the time flew by. So here we go. Welcome to the show, Emma.Runs.Ultras, Emma Coffey. What better way to see yet another awesome season out than to welcome another awesome guest to the show? I think I may have also saved the very best for last here. With today's guest, I once again find myself fascinated by the undeniable talent of a high-achieving Wonder Woman. As a working mother of 3 condensed balls of energy, it's hard to imagine how anyone finds the time to juggle the demands of not only a busy career and family life, but who also demonstrates excellence in the world of ultra running. And excel is what this lady does. She's not only stood atop the finishing podium at 1 ultra that so far this year, but 2, bagging the first female at the GB Ultras event, Manchester to Liverpool, and the 4th ultra hosted by Scurry Events. If you're anything like me, you'd be forgiven for thinking that anyone with that pedigree had been at it for years. However, this high-flying distance running talent only kicked off her ultra career last October, bagging a 3rd female at the very, very wet Glasgow to Edinburgh. Her story is sure to be one of grit, determination, and unyielding passion for running. But let's find out about how she does it as we talk challenges, achievements, motivation, and more with the lovely lady herself. Welcome to the show, Emma.Runs.Ultras, Emma Coffey.
Hi there, that was quite an intro. You're like a minor celebrity. I might use you for my next CV.
Go for it. I actually love writing these. I just then struggle to kind of blend into the chat itself.
You know what? Next time my husband's really annoying me, I'll just play that and be like, look.
That's a good way of doing it. Have you had a good day so far, Emma?
Yes, I have cycled into work. I know that's not the running type, but that's part of my training, the cycle commute there and back, back home. And I am only 1 child out of 3. So that's always nice if they've gone to sleep over to sort of run around the grandparents for the evening. So it's quite nice to have that an evening off of dinner, bath and bed.
Yeah, it makes life a little bit easier for you.
Yeah, it does. My 5-year-old's doing quite well at the moment. He's definitely going for, I'm really independent because I'm about to start school. So we're fully encouraging that.
For transparent for anyone listening, we may slip up from time to time. This is recorded weeks in advance. So if we make any reference to something that's happening, you think that's not on Emma's Instagram or on the podcast, it's because it's weeks in advance. But yeah, that was something I'm really interested by, how you managed to find the time to be a mother of 3, but you also mentioned before we hit record, you're responsible for a lot of other children as well.
I am. I'm a primary school teacher. So currently I've got a primary 5 class. They're 9 and 10 years old. So I've got 25 of them, of course, and I'm responsible for, their health and well-being, and hopefully they're learning. They're about to move on to the next stage. So there's a lot of transition going on at the moment. So making sure that they're happy and healthy going forward for the next academic session.
That's just that you have way too much energy, or you're taking something that you need to share with the rest of us. Share something with the rest of the class, maybe, is what you should say.
Well, do you know what? Funny enough, they've actually started saying that I've got 28 children because I've got 25 of them and 3 of my own children. And I actually couldn't disagree with them. But I also was like, I appreciated the kudos for that one.
Do you not have to include your partner in that as well?
Sometimes it depends what kind of...
Right, Emma. So for anyone like myself who is really new to your account, we discussed it prior to hitting record. There's not very much on your account. You don't really have the time in the day to be posting. Can you give us a little bit of a background about yourself and really how you got into running, let alone then getting into distance running, but maybe take it back to the whole beginnings of where it started for you?
I think, touching on the first Instagram presence, it really annoys my husband that he's like, oh, I've set this page up for you. I didn't even set it up for myself. And you don't put that much content on. And the reason is very true. I'm working 4 days a week. I'm coming home. I'm training 6 out of 7 days. And then I've obviously got my family to look after as well. So I think it's probably an area I could do a little bit better in. However, due to the limited post, you can find out a little bit more about me on an easier level, I suppose, rather than doing lots of scrolling. So when I pop a post up, it's usually, meaningful. So leaving, for example, leaving the ego at the back door, when you're going out and thinking that you have to run so fast all the time and sort of building in that training. The reason I suppose I started running is from childhood. I was fortunate enough that my parents were willing to travel anywhere for netball training, for hockey training. I used to swim back in the day as well. So I was able to have that opportunity to have a go at all sports, not just running. And I think that's something that I even encourage my own families in my class, allow the children to experience different sports where they can, because you never know when it'll come into play later in life. So that's where it started. And then obviously I grew up in Orkney. So the Orkney Athletics Club is where I started sort of the actual training. And believe me, I was not very good at all. I did 800 meters and the 1500 meters. And, we would occasionally go down to Inverness and compete there. It was great. I came back, never won anything. However, it set me up, I think, personally for a lifetime of, those homing in those skills that were already embedded from a young teenager. So yeah, probably thanks to the Orkney Athletic Club, as well as my parents driving back and forth.
That's a long old route, a long old commute to do as well down to Inverness. And that would have been, what do we call it now? The Queen's Stadium at the leisure centre.
Yeah,
the
we
running
used to
track.
go down, when it was like kind of the big meets, we would go and compete there. And obviously we have the rivalry between Shetland as well, so Orkney and Shetland. Again, at that time, the Shetlanders were much better than me. So at the time, I didn't think I was a good runner, because the pool was small and you never won anything. So you're like, oh, well, I'm not that good. But actually, at the time, we were competing against some talented runners in Shetland, as well as, around Inverness. However, I still enjoyed it. And, then, of course, went to university and I didn't run for years.
What then encouraged you to go back to running? Because I was going to say, with teacher training, university, it tends to be that most people live the university lifestyle.
Yes, and I can safely say I did. I agree.
Yeah, running and any other part of that whole lifestyle does fall by the wayside. What then encouraged you to go back to it?
I would say it would probably just after having my first child, and we moved out into outside Edinburgh, where I didn't have many connections with anybody, and thought, oh, might as well try again. And it wasn't any reason to lose weight or baby weight or any of that. It was just more to get a bit of headspace and just see what the local community was about. And you can find a lot from a local running group. So all my roots have been founded from the running group, and that's kind of where it started from there. And I didn't actually enter anything. I just sort of ran for enjoyment until, pregnant again. And I remember I was out with my husband, we went for a run together. Rudy must have been in nursery, and we knew we were expecting. And I ran with Rudy for the first 6 months. So I felt comfortable going out, and we were going up this hill, and I was like literally dying. My heart rate was through the roof, I was dying. My husband was like, oh, for goodness sake, Emma, don't be such a wimp. Like, you're just pregnant. And I was like, you've done this before. I was like, I know, but I have to walk. And then, of course, a couple of weeks later, we go for a scan, and the announcement is, oh, you're expecting, you've got twins. I was like, well, that explains an awful lot. And I actually didn't run with the twins when I was pregnant with them. I felt that it was just too heavy and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So 2 pregnancies, and I ran with 1 pregnancy and I didn't run with the other one.
That's not something I've had a conversation with previous running mothers about before. Actually, running as a pregnant woman, it must be really hard. Kind of sometimes wondering, are you do? And I know it's safe. I know it's safe to run while pregnant, but you must still have that niggle in the back of your head, especially when it's twins. Of, is it actually 100% safe?
Yeah, and I just didn't feel comfortable, like in myself. I was like, I just didn't feel comfortable. You know, you're bigger and you can't quite see your feet. So it just wasn't safe personally for me. And of course, I didn't think I was that large, to be quite honest, until you see the photos later and you're like, my goodness, now I understand why people like sort of took a double look at me, being like, oh, well, she's pregnant with twins, isn't she? And because I'm quite slight as well, nothing was in my favor for that one.
Yeah, if there's anything, now you can go back to your Instagram, because you don't have very many posts up. You are a very petite looking woman, so that must have been very tasking carrying twins.
Yeah, it was very tasking.
So did you once again, then same as university, take a bit of a break, put you running on hiatus when you came back from the pregnancy, or was there a time gap? What
So
then encouraged you to go back to it again?
yeah, so the reason that I sort of started running more seriously is because the twins were born quite premature. They're born at 28 weeks. So we were in the Simpson neonatal unit for some months. And during that time, you are going into a unit and you're surrounded by monitors and beeps. And it was the height of summer. And actually, you just have a new appreciation for being able to get out there and running. And I think what I've learned from speaking to other people, podcasts, and other people's Instagrams, that actually a lot of people's running journey starts from something that maybe comes from something that's quite negative.
Yeah.
And I would say that is probably where I took it quite seriously. In order then to raise money for the unit that fundamentally saved our boys, my family then organised a charity family relay from Gretna Green up to John O'Groats, whether that was walking the West Highland Way, which was my mother and father-in-law, or those that were doing the swimming and the running. And it was a real team effort. And my role in that a year later, so was running a 50K. And I had never run a marathon. So I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. It's fine. But realistically, I think what that embedded was a sense of another focus. So you weren't focused solely on looking after the twins that were fundamentally quite unwell and continue to be on discharge in and out of hospitals, but rather it gave us another focus. And I think it was a healthy focus for us,
Yeah.
for myself and my husband. And, we've got my sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws to thank for that. And then my mother and father-in-law were then able to support as well and took part in the challenge. So it was a family affair. And I think after I did the 50K with the family, there was a huge sense of an achievement that actually I was able to look after 3 young children. At one point, all 3 of them were in nappies,
Mm-hmm.
and train and we breastfeed, and then, build on that before I went back to work, being like, I really, really enjoyed that. I gained a lot from the run, but the enjoyment of being outside, the fresh air, where we live, out on your doorstep, you're not far from a really, really nice route from that months in a very sterile environment.
Yeah.
So you're going from sterile environment to the Scottish outdoors. Like, why would, it always comes back to that. I'm able to do this because I've, had a bit of a traumatic experience, but I've turned that negative into a positive through the family support. So it's really, really good. So after the 50K, I was on cloud nine. We had such a good laugh as well. It was so much fun. Running along the side of Loch Ness, and then then going up to John O'Groats, being met by some Arcadians, my friends, going across, seeing my mum and dad, and it was such a high. It came to an end. It was, well, what am I going to do next?
Mm-hmm.
I've trained for this. I've managed to support a family. I'm about to go back to work. I just didn't feel that I could just go back to work and be a mum. I needed something for me, and that's where it's really stemmed from.
That obviously connects back to what you're saying with your first child, of a sense of clarity, having running to have something for you, but then to have the sense of achievement from having done something as awesome as that all sounds as well. It must have all just rolled into that point of, because you say yourself, you needed something for you, it must have left a hole to then go, I want to do more. Did you then think that the marathon was the best option straight away, or was that kind of like a stopgap? Because you did Edinburgh 2023.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
that lovely hot sunny day that it was.
It's gorgeous. Yeah, that actually was an accident. There was I didn't mean to run the Edinburgh Marathon. There was a race going. A friend of a friend needed to do a transfer, and I was like, "Great, I can do something." And I just sort of jumped on it. I thought, "Well, that's a fantastic idea," and give myself something to look forward to, I guess. And also, when things are on your doorstep, I'm terrible at just saying no. I'm like, "Oh yeah, that sounds like fun. That's a great idea. Why not?"
Yeah.
And I was when I was up in Orkney earlier in the year, and I was saying some of the things was coming up. One of the girls from home turned around and was like, "Emma, you do know you could say no. You don't have to do these things." And we were sitting over dinner. I was like, "Yeah, but I just can't. So we're just going to do it."
That's a very Arcadian. I've got some Arcadian friends as well, but they don't exactly have a lot of events in their own as well. The same as Inverness doesn't have a lot of events.
Get like main events. So
Yeah,
kind of
you
just
end up just
that
doing
up.
them.
It's the
Yeah.
same. I've signed up to the Orkney Marathon, St Magnus Marathon again this year. Like we're going up especially for it, so I can go and run a marathon. Last year I got blown off an island. There was every weather element apart from snow, and people are going, "You're doing it again?" Yeah, I am. Just to prove that I can probably go a bit faster and do it better.
And fast is what you certainly do. Um, as we've kind of said a few times here, your Instagram doesn't hide anything. It's like the highlights. And I think that's maybe such a good thing. It's like you say, you're kind of leaving the ego at the door. It's not just posts about, oh, look at me, look how fast I'm running on a training run. It is, I have done this mega achievement, I have done that mega achievement, and I have this one coming up. Um, so it was easy to then see your first ultra being last year as well, 2023.
Yeah.
The very, very wet, as I say in the intro, Glasgow to Edinburgh. And you didn't hang around with that. You really gave that some beans. You seem to excel at fat and fast. Flat and fast.
I mean, if I was ever described as fat before, I'd probably be heading for an eating disorder. No, flat and fast. Yeah,
Flat and fast,
flat
yes.
and fast.
It's been
So
a long
yeah,
day.
it's okay. I forgive you. You've got elections coming up, so there we go.
Oh, they'll be done by this point in time, I hope.
Everybody wondering what we're talking about. No, yeah. So actually, how that came to being was a bit more purposeful for the Glasgow to Edinburgh. You know, I did sign up for that, and I signed up for that actually. I think must have been the winter before. Well, thinking about it, I do a lot of thinking before I sign up. And the reason why I'd signed up for it, I was, oh, again, it's on my doorstep, so why would I not? But I felt I needed something that was a significant challenge from running a 50K. Now, at the time of running a 50K, I was like, well, that's amazing. But it's funny with ultra runners, as soon as you start increasing the distance, a 50K feels like for most people, maybe like a 5K.
Yeah.
Because you've trained for it, so it's not as hard hitting on the body.
Is it
And
quite comparable to a marathon runner thinking about a half marathon? You can kind of just throw one out on a Sunday and no issue.
so yeah, for example, my training run actually on Sunday was doing a half marathon. So you know, in fact I clocked just shy of 30K. So that was my Sunday training run out for 2.5 hours. And I signed up to Glasgow and Edinburgh, and I was like, yep, this is a really good challenge. I don't have to train on hills. But what I did have to do is I actually sourced a coach for this because I wanted to do it properly. Because the races that came before were, you know, I hadn't trained for the Edinburgh Marathon. Didn't refuel properly. I was out the night before at a wedding for the St Magnus Marathon in Orkney. Didn't really train for that properly either. And yeah, I was kind of like, oh, I'll just go and do it and see what happens. But I do have some common sense when it came to Glasgow GTE. I needed a coach, and I'm so glad that I went down that route. because I could not continue stealing other people's ideas for Strava, because I would have looked like a right creep following people that I didn't know for ultra runners, because I don't know any other ultra runners. It was, you're just kind of stealing from family and friends for your ideas for marathon training. And from there, when I got the plan, and she was like, "Oh, you're training 6 days out of 7." I was like, "Oh my goodness, do I have time for this?" And once I started to work through timetabling of where children needed to be, what my day off was during the week, because I was working 4 days, then it did come together quite nicely. Her major rule is do not do 2 main days back to back.
Yeah.
And I was like, fine, I can keep to that. And I was pretty nervous for G2E because I'd really trained quite hard for it. Not once did I ever think I was going to get a podium finish. This was very much ultra running. I need to get to the finish line. And of course, the night before, you know what it's like, people put out their flat lays. I don't do that because my flat lays usually change last minute anyway. And I'm happy losing other people's, but not my own. Get onto a train, get to the train station, let go to Glasgow to stay with my brother-in-law the night before. He was so nice. He made me dinner. He made sure there was a taxi booked the next morning, but you don't sleep. Like, I still saw 1 o'clock in the morning, and all I heard was the rain outside. And that was like, good God, what have I signed myself up for?
Yeah,
So,
that was horrendous weekend. I was actually in Edinburgh. The whole point of that visit was to watch Gary Dempsey come across the finishing line. And we ended up coming back to Inverness of fears that the A9 was going to flood. And we
yeah.
had to just leave. Unfortunately, didn't see you coming across the line either.
Well, a lot of competitors actually got stranded, that especially ones that were, from England that had come up. And luckily, I just live along the road. But there was a few people that were like, "Oh, I'll come out and see you finish," and the boys were maybe going to come. I was like, that's not fair. But it was very much a family event. Jamie, my husband, he actually crewed me from Falkirk, because actually as ultra running, I'm actually fine. The marathon, the first half of the marathon, is actually for me is a bit of a warm up. It does take me a wee bit to get into the stride, and then from the second half, I feel that's when it turns into a bit of a race. I need to take more advice on my nutrition. And for my first ultra, I didn't really have much or any knowledge. It was more clothing was important that day, not necessarily food or water. Well, you're half drowning anyway with the rain. Your feet were wet from 3K into Glasgow. You're running through Glasgow at 6 o'clock in the morning, absolutely raining, and wondering what I've done. And I think there comes a time when people do the ultra running, there is a time during a run, you're like, why am I doing this? And then secondly, can I finish? So once it started to clear up, once I got to Falkirk, I saw Jamie. I got a change of clothes. Had coffee. I'd never taken coffee on a training run before, but at the time I was like, I need something warm, and that was then quite nice because I wasn't leading at all from the race. I was actually like speaking with people as we are running, which again you would never do in a marathon, let alone a half marathon. And then it was, approaching Ratho towards the later sort of stages of the race. And, the family are like, you do know you're in fourth. I was like, what? And you're taken by surprise. And it's like, well, the third lady is not that far ahead of you. And I was like, suddenly you've got a re-enlightened passion to try and get there, to try and get that podium, which never came into contention before. And interestingly, I went into a checkpoint. She went into a checkpoint, but I actually kind of got dried up, took a bit of fuel. She continued on. And that's when the mind games came in. She was trying to run ahead. And I was like, I'm just creeping up behind her, stayed behind her, and then sort of sped past and tried to maintain that speed into third position. I was completely surprised.
The only, I suppose, best fitting analogy I can think of is as an F1 fan is it's like a wet track, someone trying to stay out as long as they can on dry tires while someone's gone for a change for the tires appropriate for what you're doing. And by that point, you'd been soaking wet again. Wouldn't be very surprised if you're starting to chafe quite badly as well, given the amount of water. So you must have picked up your belief in yourself, the caffeine must have kicked in, and just to chase that woman down. And you didn't just beat her, you beat her by quite some time as well.
Yeah, I did. I think like from now I follow her on Strava. She races around Edinburgh as well, so it's nice to see and to see what she's doing. And I think when it comes that building, you talk about not an Instagram presence, which I don't have,
Mhm.
but I'm always very interested what people are doing and how they've succeeded, whether they're a club runner or a non-club runner, if they're doing it for mental health reasons. It's always interesting to say, oh, that's quite inspiring. And I think from my point of view, and for example, my cousin messaged me being like, God, if Emma can go and run 90K, I think I can go out and do a 5K. And if I've done that for one person, then
Yeah.
why not? It's quite nice. It's quite a rewarding feeling. And I think when you're in the depths of can I do this? I won't lie, my mind tends to go back to those early days in the hospital with the twins.
Yeah.
And raising the money for the charity and thinking, well, if my twin boys have managed to survive, then surely I can knock back another 5-10K towards to finish this race.
If in Instagram and social media is good for anything, let alone family members, it's looking at other people and going, well, if that person's doing that and they've been through all they've been through, then I can go and do it. Like you say, I can go do a 5K. I can
Yeah.
go do a 10K. There's no reason why I need to sit on my backside and go, oh, I can't run. You can run, and have people like yourself that are inspiring and motivating people through just doing amazing things and smashing out a third in your very first ultra. You did mention before we hit record that you do have a favor for the flat and fast. I'll say it that correct way this time. Did that then, having the result, encourage you to then look at the Manchester to Liverpool, or was that already on the cards?
No, not at all. To be honest, my inclination was just to do this one run and hope that I could finish. So the flat and fast definitely it suits my style of running. And I think from when I started looking at GB Ultras and what else they obviously do like race across Scotland. I know my limitations. I am not going to be a trail runner. I am doing really well at finding the time to train out like the front door to go and do my training run. I do not have the capacity to drive half an hour, 45 minutes to get on the trails for a couple of hours, then to come back again. And I also think my husband may file for divorce if I went down that route. I kind of need him at the moment to help me with the boys. Maybe later when they're a bit older, I might reconsider. But at the moment, I need it. And like, there's a lot of trail runners that just couldn't think of anything worse, and they're like, it's so boring. And it's not sometimes the most exciting for if you're wanting, but actually with the flat and the fast, you do get different elements, whether it's running through an industrial estate or through different parts of villages across Scotland along the canal route. You get kind of a breadth of areas, I guess.
Yeah.
When you're in the hills, you obviously get the views. So you also meet a few people on the route. The odd dog likes to chase you down, which is slightly unnerving. Or you have to wind your way around before you get, knocked over by a bike. But the flat and fast suit me, and I think it suits my style of running. And I think my coach has appreciated that. So when I was training for the G2E, she had actually popped in blocks where I'd be out for 3 hours of the day on those big training runs, but there might be 15 minutes, 3 blocks of 15 minutes speed work within that. And I think for me, that's what keeps it interesting, that pace within a long run.
Yeah.
So that's what I enjoy, that it doesn't keep that you're working for 3 hours. Also, I never ran anything longer than 35K before the G2E, which clocked about 93K. So it just shows with clever training and commitment that you can put your body through that. Won't lie, I didn't parent much for the next 2 days because I was a wee bit sore.
Couldn't get up and down stairs.
Oh yeah, they were painful. And like when the twins were going like running away from me, I was like, I don't think I can chase them down, and they're only 2.
I have never thought about it the way you've put that with flat running in built up areas. You would think, as my profession being in architecture, I would have more of a you know what, I like tar running. I like running in cities and towns. I've always just, I think, blanked out that there is a nicety to running through the urban elements and seeing the spray painted artwork, seeing the old buildings. It's quite similar to being out on the hills and seeing the nice scenery. It's still nice scenery. It's just how you perceive it and how you take it in. That's something I'd maybe not considered as much.
Well, if you're going out in the canal, you start out in the countryside. You know, you're there, the boats, the fields, and then as you head towards into Edinburgh, you can start to see the landscape changing, and the types
Mm-hmm.
of people change actually, and it makes for an interesting run. You know, you've got the viaduct as well for a wee bit of that cobbles that, you know, I always walk over just in case I imagine myself falling into the canal. But I do tend to do a bit of running over there as well as over the Forth, like the bridge. It's great. Easy. And then around my area, I've got 3 estates to choose from, which you would probably describe as like sort of small trails, you know, through forest kind of terrain. So if I want to mix it up, I can. And if I really wanted to, I'm sure I could drive up to somewhere in the Pentlands. I would never do that myself because I've got a horrendous reputation of not being able to follow Google Maps properly, let alone a map and a compass. I've probably got one of the worst sense of direction ever. I mean, growing up in Orkney, you didn't need a sense of direction. And even for those well-marked routes, my next 2 ultras, the second and the third one, I did take wrong turns.
I was going to say, I know a man that would more than happily take you to the Pentlands, but he is notorious for getting lost as well. Although he is getting better at it. You were saying Orcadian as well. I've never been to Orkney, but the understanding I have, it explains a lot about why you like flat, because it's fairly flat.
Oh, really, Henny, you'll be fine. And then what your challenges in Orkney is the weather, the elements. You know, that is probably the main challenge. And I was in Orkney again at the start of the year, as I mentioned earlier on, and I think I put a few stories on my Instagram of just the sound of the wind. And then suddenly in the evening, everything drops to a calm. I don't know why they don't do the St. Magnus Marathon in the evening instead of first thing in the morning. Maybe it's the boxing
Do it as a midsummer, yeah, midsummer marathon. It doesn't get dark here, yeah.
So yeah, your elements are the challenge in Orkney, not necessarily the terrain.
That maybe explains the fast part from you then is it's either getting blown along with speed work with the wind or running away from that big black cloud that's heading
We're
towards you.
heading far in, and we'll stay for a couple of days.
Yes. So the training route and the training routes, the speed work, and certainly the third place. So when you decided you wanted to do Manchester to Liverpool, that must have given you a sense of a goal that you wanted to achieve. Or did you go in again and think, I just want to get through this, get the medal and tick off another ultra? Or did you go in going, I want to better what I've done already?
I would say the expectation on myself was I should be doing well.
Mm-hmm.
I also was aware because there is maybe for some people it's an easier location. So I was thinking that possibly there might be a bit more competition that day as well. And I think with the ultra running, I was expecting more competition, and there was girls there that definitely would have been competing against. I believe I was maybe fortunate that actually the sort of the main competitors actually bowed out quite early on into the race, and therefore it kind of held the way for me just to continue. I didn't actually know that until afterwards, until you see their names and they're like, oh, that person came second the other year or fourth, and you're like, oh, okay. The expectation then I probably put on my shoulders was I should be trying to do something, but I was also thinking I need to finish because I'd not done any of the recce runs. So GB Ultra hosts recce runs as well for you if you want to see them. My biggest challenge is finding childcare for the weekend, to be honest, which I did as I phoned my mum to see if she could get a day off work to come and look after my children while I go for a run. And she was like, yeah, I guess so. I'll put it past work. She fortunately works in the secondary school that I, of course, went to. So it does help that most of the staff will have some knowledge of who I am. But, imagine putting that to the Orkney Islands Council, day off, unpaid, to go and look after your daughter's children while she goes for a run. So never mind. So she helped me with that one. So I was mostly nervous about not knowing the route, because with G2E, I knew landmarks to get to that I was able to go for. And another example of me just not getting lost, but a panic, was when I was coming into the last sort of 15K of the race. I was running along one of the main paths, and I'm like holding it together. I'm nearly finished. I'm running on my own, which is never helpful. There's nobody around me. There's no male, there's no female. And you're coming into more of the general public. There was a man ahead of me, and I had been following him for a good while. And as I approached him closer, I realized that he did not have a hydration vest on. And I was like, I've been following a random man.
You get in trouble for that.
You get in trouble. I mean, you're a bit worrying. So I did get panic. I was like, oh no, have I missed a turn off? Because I also noticed that the red ribbons had stopped then as well. And I was like, oh. So what happened is that some of the general public had actually taken off the red ribbons that are used for markers along the route, which can happen with these ultra races because they're put up, a good day before. And if anybody wants to be clever, they like to take them down to confuse people. And that's what happened to me. So I phoned my husband. I was like, I don't know where I am. I think I'm lost. And he's on the other end of the phone being like, Emma, it is a straight road. We are here. We are waiting for you. You cannot miss us. And I was like, and then he sends me a screenshot of a map. I don't read maps. I was like, this means nothing to me. I don't know where I am in Liverpool. I've never been to Liverpool. So as I'm running, I try to remain calm. And then, of course, literally 10 minutes later, you couldn't miss the GB Ultras finishing sort of 10th. And then I was like, oh, phew, that's fine. But during that race, I also got lost. Well, not got lost, but I took a wrong turn off. And this was from halfway from Spike Island. I met my coach there who was doing volunteering work. And I was going along, leaving it, big waves. Yeah, I'm doing very great. And then the next thing I hear this, oi, oi. And I'm like, oh, what have I done? And there's me about to head off into a random estate and had missed the red ribbon. The red ribbon was there that time, but sometimes with ultra running, you get so focused that you suddenly then think about what am I going to eat next, not necessarily where am I going.
When you had the panic of have I taken a wrong turn, the ribbons have stopped, had you been told what position you were in at all during that process? Did you know you were the first lady?
Yeah, I did.
You did. So did you have a bit of more of a panic because you thought, I must be really close to the finish here?
And I was like, I don't think I have it in me to then run however many K back to then try and catch up because, although you're ahead of somebody, it might only be 10, 15 minutes. Yeah. Thankfully, I won it quite well that nobody was really going to chase me down, but I didn't know that at the time. And when I was running, I didn't realise that the women that were ahead of me had bowed out of the race. So at points during the race, it wasn't until one of the members of the general public who must have been supporting somebody was like, go, shouting, go Emma, you're in first lady. And I actually turned back and I was like, no, I'm not. And in my head, because an ultra is so long, that I was like, I've got plenty of time to get there. So in my head, I've got plenty of time to sort of start picking off people. And then suddenly the challenge was, I need to maintain this position. And one of the checkpoints at one point, I was just shouting electrolytes. And my poor brother-in-law, luckily he does triathlons and he's quite used to the kind of setup. And my husband was obviously there as well. They managed to get me sorted. And then the next checkpoints, I decided I wanted orange segments, which I hadn't packed up, but the GB Ultras had it. And this poor guy, I think his name's Matt, he's part of the setup. I was eating these orange segments and just popping them in his hand. Like, it's amazing when you're in that amount of pain that you just don't care. And, you know, your actual family support are there and they're not even touching your segments, but this random stranger is, and then disposing of them for you. So he actually gave me a message later on and, you know, was a bit like, had a bit of fun about the orange segments. But it's funny how your nutrition can also change. You can prepare for nutrition, but depending on what you need because of the weather, that you need to be mindful of that as well.
If I've learned anything from seeing people do ultras and witnessing the state they're in, it's like dealing with a toddler.
Yeah, you do. And I deal with them daily and then I turn into one. So, you know, you're kind of throwing like shouting at what you want. There's no manners. It's like, I need water, I need electrolytes, I need this to eat. There is no please or thank yous. And then as I got towards the end, it was a case of, Emma, you're doing really well. You do not need to keep up this pace. And I was like, but I do. Somebody might chase me. And once I got that in and sort of reevaluated my pacing, it sort of made it a bit easier. But the Manchester to Liverpool, like people would say it's boring. They'd be like, oh, it's such a boring route. However, for me, it was a part of the world I hadn't seen. And there were landmarks coming out from Spike Island, going down sort of more to the coastal paths, then through into the industrial. And at the start, there was more of a lake route. There was a bit of everything,
Yeah.
apart from a hill, which is always reassuring.
Now, I remember the conversation with Tanya Carmona when she did her GB Ultras, and she was trying to choose which ones she did and didn't want to do to get the mega medal, whatever that's called. And she did rule. I think she might have done Glasgow to Edinburgh. She did one of the two of those, but it was ruling out the other one because it was boring and flat and didn't really go to her style. Has that been then something that you've maybe considered looking at doing, trying to get that mega medal, or does that not really drive you at all? Is it just a case of just see what comes next?
I think I've just seen what comes next and, making sure that the running is not the pinnacle of my life, that actually the family, my work, that it's just a subside. And I'm very fortunate that I found something that I'm actually okay at doing. And I think, as I said before, it's looking at your limitations at the moment. I'm not about to go and get some poles to go and run up. I mean, I'm not there yet. But it is inspiring to see people that have started sort of with the flat and fast and then they move on for a different challenge. I think for me, the challenge would probably go in for a wee bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm used to the sort of nearly 100Ks, the 50Ks or the 50 miles. Glasgow to Edinburgh is 56 miles. And then the Manchester to Liverpool is 50 miles. Now that's 6 miles is a 10K and that's an hour less running.
Yeah.
Which is always helpful. So what I was able to do there was I was able to see my pacing in my first ultra and then, right, I've got an hour that I don't have to run. How can I increase the pace for this one to make sure then that I am sort of even still challenging myself, even though that the distance is less. And then, of course, brings me into the third one, which was the fourth. This was, oh, it's on my doorstep. I can't say no.
I was going to say that must have been one of those events of, because it's here, I may as well do it.
And I did. It was, and also it was 3 weeks after. So I mean, for some people, there was actually a really good conversation on a thread the other day. And it was like, how long do you leave between ultras? And I kind of had to hold back from saying 3 weeks will be fine. Everybody else is like, oh, maybe take a month, 6 weeks before you plan in your next one. And because I'd already bagged all that winter training, and winter training is hard work.
Yeah.
I was running in the rain. I was doing my interval trainings on, wet, windy and dark pavements.
It was very snowy with you guys as well, more so than it was in the Highlands.
So it just, you're out there. And I thought to myself, well, if I managed to put all this training in, I might as well do my coach proud and be like, well, there we go. we'll do the 4th. So that one was a bit different. My husband was working that day and I was running, so we had to find childcare. Couldn't really ask my mum again. We roped in my brother-in-laws, and my mother-in-law came in along as well. But I actually just drove myself to Falkirk. It was different with the Scurry events. It was definitely more laid back because there was a relay element as well, and there was lots of different races going on. But it's probably the first race that I'd actually been at that I felt that, I don't know if, I'm not saying that they would have known who I was, but I must have been looking like I knew what I was doing, because I definitely had a few women sort of turning their heads, conversation, looking at the bib. Is she a team? Is she a solo? And it was very much a race from the very start, from with that, when there was a woman that is a very good runner, and she actually flew through the first checkpoint and I didn't, and I spent the next section catching her up. So I managed to catch her up by the bridge, the Queensferry crossing. Oh, sorry, the old Forth Road Bridge, where the checkpoint was for halfway, and I knew she wasn't that far behind me. And that's when the race had, the family were all out for all that couple of minutes to sort of wave me on, which is a really, really, it's always really encouraging. People think, oh, but we're only going to see you for a couple of minutes. It's like, yeah, but it makes a huge difference just to say that I'm here and I'm running for something. The next part from the Forth Road Bridge to Bo'ness was a bit of a disaster. And I speak about this in ultra, and a lot of ultra runners do this. In fact, marathon runners, that they have that sort of, that a bit of a wall that they can hit, and it's getting yourself through that. And because I've hit the wall, I'm used to hitting a wall. It was a bit different this time as I approached Blackness Castle, which I know very well because I obviously run round there. I went the wrong way and another runner was shouting at me like, no, this way. So I swerved, had to go back on myself, then go round Blackness. And I suddenly felt really, really ill. And I've never felt ill on a run. So I'm approaching Blackness, we go over the top of it, and I'm coming down a steep set of steps. And there's a photographer there ready for that, that picture that everybody wants, you running your ultra with the Blackness Castle in the background. Meanwhile, I'm throwing up over the side of it.
Oh no.
It was horrendous. The photographer was like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I've got one hand covered, one hand holding up to be like, do not take a photo of me right now. This is not the time. And, you have to kind of like, oh, well, need to keep running. So then I ran into Bo'ness, and my sister and brother-in-law were basically saying, look at you, you've got far too many layers on for a start. And sometimes because you're tired, you kind of forget those elements.
Yeah.
So take a top off, take that headband off because it's pretty hot, and take some hydration. Again, triathletes, they knew what they were doing, quickly filled everything up and off I went. But there was really, at that point, there was a team there. I don't even know who she was. She came up to me and was like, you're doing absolutely amazing. Please keep going. And then I think that's what kind of kept me going as well, is that small recognition of, okay, I've made it to this checkpoint, let's finish the race. And that was then along through Grangemouth, and there was a few hills there. So I actually walked those, and I often don't walk I don't walk ultras, I just run the whole time. But for the hills, I'd learned from my previous that I was doing well in a position that it was okay to walk elements to then finally run into Falkirk. And finishing at the Kelpies was really cool, really relaxed, a fun video. And I stayed behind to sort of, congratulate the second and third as well.
Was that woman in second still chasing you down quite closely by that point, even throughout your illness? Or had she kind of just blown up because she flew off so quick, thinking, seeing you and going, oh, I'll have her, I'll go out nice and quick and she won't chase me down?
No, I think I had sort of gotten rid of her by then.
You pushed her over the wall.
I know, I've just been sick. I don't think I can. But the funny thing is, when you're getting towards the front of the race, you're then effectively racing against men.
Yeah.
So I actually came fifth overall
Yeah,
in
I'd seen a
that
lot of
race.
those. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's quite nice to see that as the distance that you are on par with males when it comes to that longer distance. And my kind of tactic there is again using the sprint that if you look on my Strava, there'll be a couple of elements that, my goodness, she did like a 410, 420K, and that's usually to kind of beat the males because you're winning as the female, you need to have another element of competition. And what tends to happen with males is they don't chase you down. They're done. They're already,
Just by that point.
yeah, they've got possession. I was more upset that we had to go through a muddy little trail and it messed up my new trainers more than and I also then went the wrong way on that one as well. That was twice on that route on the fourth ultra. I carried on again going through a housing estate. I don't know what it is with my attraction of housing estate. And there was a group of people at a bus stop shouting me that I was going the wrong way.
I think we definitely need to get you in contact with Uncle Lee. You might be able to get each other not getting so lost and you can learn maps together.
I know it's when they say well-marked routes, and I managed to get lost, well, not lost, but take a wrong turn quite easily in all of them.
I think I can't remember if it was Glasgow to Edinburgh or Manchester to Liverpool. I did see you were 27th on the finishing sheet as well in the mix with the men. It might have been the first one. I'm not sure.
It was actually, I'm just trying to think back.
Yeah,
And then again, managed to bring that number down. I think that was
yeah.
17th or 18th and then 5th. So there's been a nice progression with the ultra running. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it is really nice to have podium positions in the 3 ultras that I've completed in. And it's nice to occasionally I'll have a few messages in my inbox, a few likes here and there. But I think my Instagram is the main highlights. And if you're interested in some of the stuff I'm doing, great. And if you're not, that's absolutely fine. I wouldn't be offended. There's a niche. Ultra runners are some interesting people.
They definitely are, and that's a good thing of saying as well. It's a good headspace to have with especially with social media. Not everyone's account will always be the same as it was when you first join it, and it's okay to unfollow someone if they have content that doesn't gel with what you're liking. I am hoping, however, because we do have a number of ultra runners who have been on the show in the past and also listen, they may not be aware of you, may follow you to kind of get in contact. They all live in and around your area as well, so it might be possible to then have more than solo runs when you can fit them in. With ultra running, then I noticed today. This is where we're going to kind of flick back as to a time stamping it. You had a story up about training for a half marathon. What
Yeah.
is on your cards next? Are there any more ultras in mind? Because after finishing third and first, it must be really hard to then go, what am I going to do next? So what is next on your kind of challenge list of things you want to achieve?
So the half is really because the Island Games is being hosted in Orkney in 2025. And it's a very interesting concept that there's a few people of my age that we would have ran together back in the day. It's now in Orkney have put in their hat in the ring to be selected. Now, unfortunately, they don't even have a marathon or an ultra on the go. So my next option was half. And actually, it took me a lot of persuasion. A lot of people had, oh, you're going to try this? What do you think? You know, you're doing really well in your running. There are already runners on the island that actually run half marathons and are very good at them. And there's also girls from Orkney that are not on the island that run halves as a club. So at last minute, I put my name in and to see if I can get a qualifying time. So there are 2 qualifying times in 24 and 25. One of them is to be in Orkney and one of them is to be in the mainland. So I did a 3-week training block for half marathon. My coach is, what are you going to hit me with next? We've gone from ultras to marathons to half. This is kind of the wrong way around, but never mind. and I managed in my first half marathon at Edinburgh there, which was not heat this year. It was really quite
It was
miserable,
really wet, yeah.
so wet. I managed a 1:29 and 1 second. The qualifying times, I think, is 1:31 something, so well within that qualifying time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's exciting and very pleasantly surprised. But interestingly enough, again, my race, even for a half marathon, shows two different races. It shows a steady first half, and then the second half shows an increase of speed.
Yeah.
So when I started out the run, I was thinking about a 4:18 per K, a 4:15, and trying to keep to that as much as possible. But my average came out as a 4:11 from that setup. So can I
Yeah.
go at 4:11 from the very beginning and try and get faster? I need a bit more interval training, but it's shown with good coaching and good commitment and training all of your systems, as my coach likes to put it, that there is potential there. So my next really serious race is doing a half marathon in Orkney. So there's one in August and there's one in September. I'm aiming for the August race because if it does not go well, I've still got time to rectify that in September. Whereas if I leave it to September, there's nothing I can do.
That's a proper athlete mentality. It's like qualifying for the Olympics or the
Really?
Commonwealths or even.
How exciting! Like Orkney are getting to host this, you've got your new mascot, you've got volunteers, there's people, even more people can be visiting and hosting the island. There's a lot of talented people in Orkney that will do an incredible job of hosting and organising these games. And if I get selected to be part of that, I will be over the moon. Looking at times, you want to be able to come in with a good time, might not necessarily win a medal.
Mm-hmm.
Those people that maybe are really good on the Faroe Islands might not travel to Orkney. So it's very much about, costings, timings and injuries. And there's a long way to go till 2025 in July. So that's my main aim at the moment. But I couldn't finish the season without doing an ultra. So I'm going back to Glasgow to Edinburgh in October.
That'll be spot on. You'll see AB, you'll hopefully see Jace, all being
Yes.
well with his collarbone and his injuries. And
Interestingly enough, I did have a few Instagram messages between the two of them. So it was nice to see Evie say very good at just being fast all the time. I think this will be quite a challenge for him, which he said. But he's done ultras before. They're all familiar
he's done
with it.
two, yes. That was going to be a question as well. Do you use trail shoes for your ultras, or do you use road shoes?
Road shoes. I usually run.
So you're like AB then, yeah.
Podcast Cliftons. I prefer just running road shoes, and that suits me fine. So with that,
are they also carbon plated?
No, they're not. I ran with my first carbon plated shoes for the half marathon. And when I got them, I was kind of half again forced into buying them because I've got stupidly small feet, that they were on a really good offer. I got them for £50 at Pros, which is like a bargain. They're bright yellow, can't miss me. And I have to say it's been, quite life-changing.
Eye-opening, isn't it? You start to wonder sometimes, like you've mentioned throughout this conversation of, am I good enough, or am I that fast? And then you put on carbon plate shoes. And
you feel you can do anything.
Yeah, it makes such a big difference.
Yeah, huge. I highly recommend them. As an ultra runner, I wouldn't choose to run in them because you're trying to keep your pace steady, not fast.
Yeah.
And I think as I've gotten better and more knowledgeable, I do change my shoes a lot more than I used to. So there has been quite a few changes going over as my knowledge increased, but also I guess my success. And my aim, if I don't make the team for the Island Games, I'm actually not going to be too disappointed because I'm not naturally a half marathon runner, but I'm glad I gave it a go. And I think eventually it would be really nice to try. And I think I read this on your Instagram the other day, actually, when I was doing my own bit of research, was looking, international.
Yeah.
Seeing what that would be brilliant when the boys are a bit older, and the poor boys they've been just around Edinburgh. My husband did the 10K and then I did the half. So they're very much accustomed to watching us
it's a good way to see the world, especially from a young age. They might be put off running because their parents are crazy people, but at least they get to see the world and they get more of an eye open kind of a perspective of different cultures and different countries, like that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think it would be good, when if we do go away somewhere, it's like we can target some things. We've got for the St Magnus Marathon this year, I'm running on the Sunday, and my husband's put his name in for the sprint triathlon in Stromness on the Saturday. So, we're I mean, they'd rather be sitting on a tractor at our farm,
Yeah.
but they're going to have to come and watch us do some sort of sport first. And I think it's good for the boys to see that not only, and I think I've said this in a previous podcast, especially teaching girls, especially to see that there's some, dare I say the word, role model.
Yeah.
They can see a female that is doing sport. You don't have to be running around a team sport. You can do an individual sport, and it's something that you can go back to, and they can see that sport is for women as it is for men as well.
Yeah, I think something with our ages being fairly similar and growing up, there were female athletes that you could use as role models, but at the same time there weren't that many, or they weren't in the news as much, and they didn't highlight that to young girls to go, you could be achieving anything you want to achieve. It was always the boys of, you could be like this guy, or you can do this. So it is nice to see the likes of yourself and other ladies showing that you are role models. You are more than capable of doing these things, and it's not just a male led thing anymore. You're beating the guys. You're showing them how it's done. I was looking at your times, by the way. You beat me on every single timing bar one.
Oh, which one?
5K. So
Yeah.
you need to go and beat me there as well.
What's their time for your 5K?
My 5K is just under 20 minutes.
See, I've
Just
not
under.
broken that one yet. No, I'll need to get
Yeah.
myself to a park run, and I've never done a park run.
Yeah, that will encourage you. That will drag you along, because it's not a race, but other people there will make you run faster.
Well, yeah, it's not a race, but it is a race to some people.
It is. It
So
is.
yeah, that's my 5K. Yes, I've not broken the 20 minutes.
Finally, then, well, as we're talking about Island Games and everything that's coming up, because the Island Games are going to be like a Boston qualifier for you, with your race, your half marathon in August and September, is it an immediate decision then whether you make the team, or do you have to wait a little bit to find out?
You have to wait a lot longer. I then have to get chip times in 25 as well. So I also need to get myself strength training. That is one thing as an ultra runner I do not do. And again, I get a little bit of with strength training. I'm like, yeah, I'll get there.
You just said you live on a farm. You should lift hay bales and.
Yeah, I wish at the moment in Edinburgh, not quite so much. I think that will be. I think for winter.
Mm-hmm.
I will probably change sort of what I'm doing training wise, and build in a bit more of that strength program and mix it up a little bit, I guess. So I think it's always funny when you tell people are like, oh, when you're going to the trails, oh, I'm not. Oh, so how many days a week do you strength train? Oh, I don't. They're like, you just run. Yeah, I just run. That's it.
Yeah, that's you would benefit from strength training, and that would be scary then to see how well you're doing just now, and that's without strength training.
So yeah, we'll see how it goes, but it's very exciting, having these plans and maintaining accountable for it as well. There are times during the week where things, when it's the week of parents' evening or there's school shows, you kind of have to look at your training plan to see where you can fit in. And also even just a wee bit of a small social life if you get one.
Mm-hmm. Think as the kids get older, you're not only going to have parents' evening where you're the teacher, you're going to have parents' evening where you're going to have to go as the parent as well. That's going to be even less time in your running day.
If the teacher wants to do a training run with me while talks to me about the job.
Could save a lot of time.
Yeah.
Right, Emma. Where can people find you if they would like to connect with you, find out all the amazing things you've done and what you've got coming up?
I guess it's Emma.Runs.Ultras, which is a funny tag to have when I'm now trying to do half marathons. But my heart is in ultra running, so we'll keep that there. But I think it just shows for some of us ultra runners out there that we are capable of being not too bad across all distances.
Yeah, no, I think if there's any experience I've had with interviewing people on the podcast, is ultra runners have such a good mentality and good capability of doing a whole range of distances. They're definitely the utility, the Swiss Army knife of runners. They just throw themselves at anything and can really just achieve to the highest level.
I mean, you don't even need to do that much training. 3 weeks, and a half.
Well, you're going long and slow. Well, you're going long and fast, but slow things down, go a long time. You're going to go fast on the short. No, that's fantastic. Hopefully, as I say, it will attract a lot of people to come and make connections with you. Share the ultra love. And maybe recommend a few, I will say it correct again this time, flat and fast international ultras for you.
That would be really helpful. I can, it'll be a different experience. Those ones will definitely be for the finishing line, not the podium. But it's amazing to see some of the runners out there at the moment, and I think kudos to Jasmine Paris. I mean, she's probably somebody who a lot of females and males, to be fair, can actually sort of aspire and relate to that. She's, again, doing what she can and producing some amazing results.
Oh, it's definitely nice to see more of a rise in female forward running to inspire, as you say, not only the women, but the men as well, as there's more equality. And as you beat us left, right, and centre, as it should be. You're the stronger gender.
Stronger gender. I've been trying to tell you guys for years and nobody seems to listen.
We don't have to pump out babies, so you're all stronger than we are.
I mean, if I've aged anything, it's the children that have aged me quite significantly.
Not the ultras.
Not the ultras, that's the easy part. Jamie, my husband, calls it home avoidance. Oh, what's home avoidance this weekend? And it's like, well, why don't I run there and you meet me there, and then we can kind of take over the parenting. So yeah, that's how we juggle that home avoidance, is maybe run to or from a destination. That's a good way.
It's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Right, Emma, that has been spot on. That's a fantastic way to see the season through with a good chat about an amazing woman doing amazing things.
I'm honoured to be the finale season finale.
It's a long one too. I'm just seeing the time. It's 1 hour and 6 just for the chat. So I am so happy for that.
I talk so much.
It's been so good. No, not at all. That's going on in its entirety. I can't wait to hear what people think. But thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll look to your 5K soon.
I hope you do. I hope you do. Thank you very much. I'm going to hasten a guess here and say that this one is going to be popular. Well, if not more so, on par with last week's chat with Jimmy Bunter. It was a little bit longer, as I said beforehand, than what our usual chat lengths are, but it was well worth it. Thank you to Emma for coming on to speak, but all the best with the qualification for the Island Games. I'm excited to see how that goes. I'm also excited to see how any future ultras go for Emma, especially with how well the first 3 have gone. She's got an undeniable talent for the distance, even if she admits that the flat and fast straight courses are more in her favour. I, for one, will be taking some notes and maybe might sneak a few DMs to Emma as I prepare for the Loch Ness 24 Ultra myself, which I'm now going into as a solo effort. I might have a bit on that at a later date, but for now, let's finish off by thanking Emma once again for joining me. Such a great chat and a lot to look forward to from her. But let's look at wrapping up the season. Thank you, as always, for joining me today, downloading or streaming the podcast. It will forever be the best way you can support what I'm doing with the show when it comes to figures and getting out there, adding up the chain and just showing people what we're up to. If you'd like to show your physical support for the podcast, though, you can buy a t-shirt from our merchandise partners over at Twisted Running. You can find them through Google searches, through their own social media, or by popping onto our website and using the link directly to the Point 99's little club shop there. Our website is the Point 99 podcast, and the link is bang right on that front page. The show is available on all major podcast platforms and on our website via the inbuilt player on the episodes page. You can also find us on YouTube podcasts or on YouTube itself if you want to have a nice little graphic video in the background. Finally, you can follow us on Instagram by searching the Point 99 podcast. If you want to get in contact, you can drop me an email at the point99podcast@gmail.com, through the DMs on Instagram, or you can also get in contact directly with myself at my own account, Mr._Steve_runs. But that's it for this season. I kind of glazed over at the end there. I do anticipate coming back for another season. I know last season, season 4, I was unsure. I kind of was muddying the waters a little bit, but I have really, really enjoyed season 5. It's an effort and a half when you're doing it in and around your day job, especially when your day job is elections. But we've got there. It's been one hell of a season, and I've had some amazing, amazing guests on and some truly spectacular chats. I've loved sharing it all, and I've loved doing it all for you guys, hearing what you guys have thought and sharing the love to the community and beyond. As I say, I will hopefully be back for season 6. I will maybe try get some local runners involved this time because, spoiler, hopefully I'll cover this in the future, I have put feelers out about joining a local club. As I say, I've got some Loch Ness 24 solo effort stuff to prepare for. I've got a half marathon on a military base. I've got a marathon I'm training for. So there's things that I want to share. There's chats that I want to have. Maybe throw in a few guests there as well. Still a lot of people in the community that I want to share their stories from, or at least touch on. But yeah, we've got plenty to do, plenty to share. Have a few weeks off, but I will hopefully, fingers crossed, be back. You just let me know what you want to hear, though. If you want to hear another season, you let me know, and we will make that happen. But until the next time you hear from me, please stay safe, enjoy your runs, and you may, hopefully, hear from me soon.